Welcome everyone to this session of EasySPC by BCN. For those of you who are not aware, BCN, we're a managed service provider here in the UK who specialise in lots of different IT related areas, one of which is data analytics and automation. And as a Microsoft partner, we use the Microsoft technologies such as Microsoft Power BI, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, SharePoint, etc. All of that Power Platform stack, as well as the Azure cloud services too. What we're here to talk about today is one of our Power BI custom visuals we've developed called EasySPC, which is designed to help organizations create control charts at scale with the ability to do all of the best practice features and requirements that you're looking to do when you're utilizing SPC charts, such as being able to re-baseline, recalculate your limits, add annotations, etc. In addition to that, we will also be sharing a new concept to you, or we like to think is new, called Spotlight, EasySPC Easy Spotlight. And what EasySPC Spotlight is designed to do is provide you a holistic view of your data at a glance without the need of having to dive into each specific SPC chart. But I'm sure that will make a little bit more sense to you all as we go through this demonstration today too. So once you've downloaded EasySPC and you start utilizing SPC charts as part of your Power BI reports, this here on screen is an example of what an output could be as you're utilizing EasySPC. So as you'll be able to see, right now we're looking at the number of incidents each week in a mental health inpatient ward. Our target is here in this static green line at the bottom. So our target is 35. We've got a target of 35 incidents or less each week in the mental health ward. What we can also see is that on our center line, we've switched the labels on so we can see the value of that center line, which is telling us that at the start of this process, we were averaging 68 incidents each week on the wards. So almost double our target. What we can also see on the screen are our upper and lower control limits in the red dotted lines. And our data points are in the grey and red colours. And I'll quickly tell you a little bit about the colours that I'm using for this demonstration here today. And please be aware that when you are using EasySPC yourselves, you're able to use any colours you like for these different data points and different rules. You've got the full flexibility to change those to any colour you like, including the lines in between the data points, etc. But for the purpose of this demo, the colours I've decided to use is dark grey for my baseline data points. And as you can see, as I've hovered over the data point, it does provide you with a tooltip with additional information in regards to that data point. So you can see the date, the measure, the control limits it's referred to. And also what you can see at the bottom of that tooltip is a message being displayed, just letting you know that this data point you're looking at is part of our baseline data. And therefore the special cause rules can be ignored. So the dark grey are therefore my baseline data, and I'll have that message displayed at the bottom of the tooltip. The light grey data points are my non-baseline data points, and therefore do not have that message displayed at the bottom of the tooltips, as you can see, as I'm hovering over the different data points there. The other colour that you can see on the chart are the red data points, which are highlighting special cause variation in the charts. For example, in this example here, we can see that this is a rule 3, 2 out of 3. So 2 out of the 3 data points are near the upper control limit, and therefore it's highlighted these 3 data points here in red as that special cause, rule 3. Further down here, we can see we've got a rule 4 of 3 sigma violation, for example. And something important to know as you're using EasySPCs, that EasySPC will automatically highlight where there is special cause within your charts for you. So just to talk you through the chart in a little bit more detail then, effectively what happened here was, as we say, we've got a target of 35 incidents each week on the ward. We're almost double that target at 68 in average, and therefore a decision was made on the 22nd of December that there wanted to be some improvements on the wards and look to reduce the number of incidents that are happening each week, and make the wards safer for both patients and staff. And therefore, on the 22nd of December, this particular mental health hospital decided to mark a baseline at this data point here, therefore saying that all of the data points up to and including this data point here are now part of our baseline, and therefore they've gone into that dark grey, as I alluded to before. Thereafter, we went into a learning phase over an 8-week period, and the next 8 data points are effectively reflecting our testing phase, where effectively different processes were introduced to try and help reduce the number of incidents happening each week on the wards. That could have been from changing processes or systems or ways of working. It could have been by reducing occupancy on the wards. It could have been by adding police officers to the wards, etc., etc. Now, following a review of the success of the testing phase and implementing the new processes, what we saw was there was a 25% reduction on average on the number of incidents each week on the mental health wards, which was some great news. So effectively what I wanted to happen here was they wanted to recalculate the limits at this point. And there was a shift of the baseline by 8 data points. So we recalculated the limits by 8 data points to reflect that change in the system. And therefore what you can see is there's been that step change, and the upper control limit has reduced from 93 at the start of the process to 73. The centre lines from 68 to 51, so our average has come down from 68 to 51, and our low control limit has also come down from 44 to 30. And therefore we've been able to reflect a change in the system for the positive. So we're still not quite out of the target, but we've made that improvement as part of that chart here as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change tabs and show the exact same data and bring this into EasySPC, and we'll do it from scratch. What you can see on screen now is the exact same data as we saw on the screen previously. But this time, this is sort of the default view as you first bring your data into EasySPC and Power BI. So as an example, what you may have when you're creating your report is, for example, you could have a line chart, a simple line chart in Power BI, but actually you're wanting to use a control chart. So as mentioned before, you can go to App Source and download EasySPC, and the EasySPC icon will then appear as a visual for you to be able to utilize. I can then click on the EasySPC visual, and it will plot me a control chart. And this is what a default control chart will look like as you first bring your data into EasySPC. One of the first things to sort of highlight and inform you of is that as default, you'll see that all my data points are the dark grey I mentioned earlier, which is therefore telling me that all the data points are part of my baseline data. And that's because when you bring your data into EasySPC, as default, the whole chart is seen as baseline data. Another thing to quickly mention before we get onto how you mark your own baseline is we can go to our homepage on the top right of our screen here. And as I click on the homepage button, what that will provide you with is our home screen, where it will share with you all the different control chart types that you're able to use as part of EasySPC. So as mentioned before, we can use run charts, the C charts, the U charts, XMR, T charts, etc., all as part of EasySPC. This page has been designed based on customer feedback to provide you with some high-level detail of which chart type you may want to use based on the data sets that you're using. So a lot of the feedback we were getting from customers was that typically in an organization, there may have been there may be an analytics team or a BI team who are creating reports for the organization. That team may have one or two experts from an SPC perspective in their team who would know exactly which SPC chart type to use for that particular data set. There may also be a separate QI team, a quality improvement team, who are also creating SPC charts, and again may only have a handful or less SPC experts who would know exactly which chart type to use. So we've just tried to provide some high level information for you on this page to help inform you and recommend which chart types you may want to use for your data. We'll never force any chart types on you. They're just recommendations that you can choose to use if you wish. We also have our chart selection wizard in the top left. Again, to help you select the correct chart based on the data set you're using. And effectively, it will ask you questions about your data. And then as you provide answers to those questions, it will recommend the suitable charts on the right-hand side for you to choose from. So as I go by and say, actually, my data is count data, we're looking at the number of instances from my data set. My data isn't rare event, it's non-rare event data. It is equal. And after answering those 4 or 5 questions there, I've found out that actually a C chart would be best for me for the data set I'm using. I can then go ahead and click on the C chart, and now it has plotted a C chart for me and used all the calculations for a C chart for my control charts, and all the limits are reflected based on a C chart now. So now I've selected the right chart type I want to use, and I've got my data into Power BI, selected EasySPC, and I've got a control chart. As mentioned, all my data points I've currently seen as baseline data. So one of the first things I want to do, as I have a license, is mark my own baseline. So if you remember from the previous example I shared, it was on this data point here on the 22nd of December, where a decision was made at the mental health hospital to mark a baseline, and that we wanted to make some changes in the system and look at making some improvements in the wards and reducing the number of incidents. So some things to be aware of as I'm about to do this is that if we can see, our centre line is currently 59, our upper control limit is currently 83. We've got a few data points which are showing special cause for some different reasons here, a rule 4 and a rule 3 for this particular data point, for example. Now, as I select mark baseline, to do so, all I have to do is left click on a data point and it brings me a menu of options. There's a few different options which I'll go through as part of this demo, but the first things that you want to do when you create an SPC chart is mark your own baseline and tell the chart where the norm is for your process, if you like. So as I select mark baseline, what it will do is it will use all the data points up to and including the data point I've selected as my baseline data and recalculate the limits based on that selection. So as I select mark baseline, what you'll see is the upper control limit changed from 83 to 93. Those data points which were showing special cause previously no longer are, because they're now within the control limits. And our centre line has also increased from, I believe it's 53 to now 68. What we can also see is that some of the data points have changed colour. So all the data points up to the data point I selected on the 22nd of December are now in my dark grey, as they were, because they're now part of my baseline. And thereafter, these are all light grey data points and not showing that message at the bottom of the tooltip because they're no longer part of my baseline data. To the right hand side of my chart, as you can see now, is showing a lot of reds, which is showing me a lot of special cause. But we can probably understand why there's a lot of special cause. We've seen the output from the previous chart. We know there's been some improvements made, and we'll make some changes to reflect that as we go on as part of this demonstration. Now, one of the next things that you may want to do, and I recommend that you probably do to help with the end users understanding what's happening as part of the journey of your SPC, is to annotate and let the end user know what you've done at different stages. So what we might want to say is we've marked a baseline here as looking to introduce new initiatives to help reduce the number of incidents. And I'm not the best speller, so I do apologise for my spelling. But we can then save that annotation onto the chart. If we hover over the tooltip again, we can see the annotation at the bottom of the tooltip. Most of our customers tend to use the feature where you can pin an annotation to the chart itself. So you can hover over the annotation, see the full annotation. If you hover over and left click, it will pin that annotation to the chart. This can be really useful if you are still using PDF and PowerPoint as part of board packs and things like that. So you can still see the annotations on the chart as part of those reports as well. And again, the end users can understand what's happening as part of that journey. You may want to add another annotation here saying testing phase started, for example. And we can keep that one there as well. And effectively, there was an 8-week period where we introduced new initiatives to try and help reduce the number of incidents. And it was at this data point here where there was a rule 1 shift, 8 or more consecutive points above or below the center line, that we saw that was the start of the change in the system and the 25% reduction in the number of incidents over time. And therefore, what we wanted to do was reflect that change in the process. So to do that, we need to recalculate limits. So again, we can left click on a data point, and we've got a few more options now appear in our menu. So we've now got the shift options. And there are effectively 2 ways of being able to shift in EasySPC or recalculate your limits. Firstly, there's what I like to call the manual way, where you can select start shift on a data point, and then you can manually select how many data points you'd like to recalculate your limits by. And if I want to say select 10 data points I wanted to recalculate limits by, I can select the 10th data point, select end shift, and what we can see is it's now recalculated the limits based on those 10 data points I've selected. And those 10 data points are now in that dark grey I mentioned earlier, because then they're part of my baseline again, my new baseline. I'm just going to remove that shift now as well. So it's very easy to remove a shift, just to left click on a data point to do that as well. Now, most of our customers tend to shift by 8 data points as a general rule of thumb. So just provide that quick and easy way for you to be able to shift by 8 data points there for you as well. So as I select shift 8 data points, what again it has done is selected those next 8 data points and used them to recalculate the limits for my new baseline. So we can see we've got a new upper control limit of 73. Our average has come down from 68 to 51 and lower control limit of 30. And again, what we may want to do is add an annotation here and just help the end users understand what we're doing and why. And it would help if you could spell as well. Recalculated limits by 8 points following successful implementation of X, Y, and Z. Z, Y, X, because I can't type wrong. And we can save that there as well. And again, we're just helping the end user understand what's happening as part of this journey. So they know why we've marked a baseline and we're looking to make some changes and introduce some new initiatives to help reduce the number of incidents. We then went into a testing phase where we introduced those new changes to the wards. And then following that testing phase, we've seen a success, and therefore we've decided to recalculate the limits to reflect that change in the system and them successes. And I know you wouldn't do that here, but just to give you the idea that you can recalculate limits as many times as you want to and need to as part of those charts there as well. And very easily come in and remove those as well as part of your charts. So they're very dynamic and very flexible and easy to make changes with too. Now, one of the things that you may have noticed, and one of the questions I asked when I was being shown this example from the hospital was, okay, it makes sense, you've seen a reduction in limit, you've seen special cause here, a reduction in terms of incidents, but you also saw special cause 2 weeks earlier. So why didn't we recalculate our limits here? And the feedback actually was, well, they wanted to do 2 things here. Firstly, once they spoke to the wards to understand why this particular week had such fewer incidents than all the other weeks, which of course is a positive. We're lower than the control limit. It's lower than it's ever been since before that, sorry. but we wanted to understand why. And when we spoke to the ward managers, the feedback was actually there was lower occupancy on the wards that week, and due to lower occupancy, resulted in lower incidents. So it was a bit of an outlier in the data. So two things needed to happen here. One, we wanted to reflect that in the system. So again, we can left click on a data point, and we have the option to what we call ghost a data point in this menu of options here as well. What we mean by ghosting a data point is we will remove that data point from the calculations of the SPC chart, but not remove the data point from the chart itself. So as I select ghost data point here, we'll see that that data point has changed from red to a really light grey, and it's sort of greyed out that data point. If you hover over the tooltip, you can also see that the value is being ghosted at the bottom. And I would also then recommend that you probably want to annotate here as well, and you might just let the end user know why you've ghosted the data point. So ghost this data point as lower occupancy in the ward this week, for example. And again, just helping the end user understand the rationale behind you doing what you've done there in terms of ghosting that data point. And we can save that there as well. So those are the key features and differences between the free version and the paid for version of EasySPC. So everything I've shown you up to now, where I've left clicked on a data point and seen this menu of options, requires a license key to be able to do. So if you want to be able to mark your own baselines, recalculate limits, add your annotations to the different data points, ghost your data points, these are all features that require a license to do so. Now within EasySPC, there are over 100 customizable features and settings available to utilize. Anywhere from being able to change the chart types and the font types that have been used, to the colors of the baselines and subsequent baselines, etc., etc. So there's lots of different settings available and customizations that you're able to do to ensure that the SPC charts are in brand with your organization and what you're looking to achieve. What I'll also do now is I'll just quickly go through some other features and settings that a lot of our customers have really benefited from. We've decided to call EasySPC for a reason. We like to think it's easy for you to interpret as an end user in terms of the charts, but also easy for the report creators. And what we mean by that is we're not having to manually manipulate data in the back end, whether that's in Excel files or SQL or using DAX where possible, and instead being able to use some of the out-of-the-box settings within EasySPC to manipulate your data. And likewise, if you need to make any changes to the charts, hopefully that's quite easy and simple for you to do so within EasySPC, as opposed to some of the traditional tools that we've been using up to now in Excel and others. So one of the things that of course you're able to do is add a target line. One of the areas that you can do that, we've got a quick chart settings menu in the top right, which just gives you access to some of the more used settings as part of EasySPC. One of those, as I just mentioned there, is a target, so you can decide whether you want a target line to show or not, and what value that target line should be showing. So if I wanted my target to be 80, for example, I can click save there, and now you can see that my target is now 80. In addition to that, just sticking with target lines for a second, we also have the option, as well as being able to change the names of the target, of the title for the target, whether you want to use goal or benchmark or anything else. You can also change the target source. As default, it'll be in chart, which is what I'm showing you now, where effectively within the chart, you can change what target needs to be. So if you wanted to add a target on a data point, for example, for a specific data point, you could also do that. But the other option is to add a target as a measure. And you can add a target as a measure here, where you can see my mouse. And the scenarios where this has been really beneficial for some of our customers is where you've got a variable target line over time. So if, for instance, you're looking at 5 years worth of data, and in year 1 your target was 80%, in year 2 it was 85, year 3 87, year 4 90, for example. If you had that as a measure in your data and added it here, you'd have a variable target line over time as opposed to static when you see it on screen now. Some other settings just to make you aware of, as I mentioned, trying to make it as easy as possible for report creators. If you wanted to show your data in decimal points, you can do that by just changing some settings in EasySPC. So for example, if I want to show by 2 decimal points, you can see our labels and tooltips have now changed to 2 decimal points here as well as I've selected. I can then also go into the axes settings and change how many decimal points the y-axis is displaying as well. So I might also want the y-axis to display in 2 decimal points. On the x-axis, we've got all the different date formats that you might want to use, including European and US date formats. You have the ability to change what is being shown on the x-axis as well in terms of date. So especially when you've got lots of data and lots of data points, what you will want to see are all the data points in the chart, but what you may not want to see are all the different dates on the chart. And sometimes it can become unreadable as well when you've got lots of data points. So we call it showing every nth on the label on the x-axis. But for example, if I wanted to show types in 4 on the x-axis now, it should show me every 4 weeks worth of data points. However, on the chart itself, we're still seeing all data points. So that can be really helpful when you've got lots of data in your chart too. Another setting, format setting, which lots of our customers like to use is the y-axis format. So as I've done here in this data set, I've just brought some standard blank formatted data. But if I wanted to change that to a percentage, I can do that. I can easily change the setting here and we can see that my data is now showing as a percentage on the y-axis, on the labels, and also within the tooltips. And that goes to say with hours, minutes, seconds, or if you want to times by 100,000 or 10,000 too, you've got the ability to do that. So for example, if I want to show my data within minutes on the y-axis, it now converts it to minutes for you. So again, you're not having to do any manual manipulation of your data in the back end yourself. Lots of other settings to go through. As I say, we've got over 100 customizable settings, including being able to set a maximum or a minimum on the control limits as well, the upper and lower control limits. These use cases we tend to find have been useful for if you're looking at data sets such as sickness absence, where you've actually got you can't go over 100% sickness absence, you can't go less than 100, but sometimes statistically the control limits will go above or below 0 and 100. In those instances, you can enable a max of 100 for the UCL and a min of 0 for the LCL in those scenarios where you may want to. You've also got the option to show sigma 1 and 2 and change the colors and thickness and thinness of those lines if you so wish. One other thing I'll quickly show and mention as well is the rules. So we've got all 5 rule types available within EasySPC, and they're all able to be switched on or off as relevant to you and your organization, as well as that you can also change the colors of the different rules. So if you wanted rule 1s to be shown in pink, for example, you can do that, and rule 2s in another color, and so on. Now, what I'm showing on screen now is another example of an SPC chart as part of a Power BI report. And this is something that one of our customers, Cincinnati Children's Hospital over in the US, has shared with us based on their patient and family experience key metric scores. So what you can see is on this page, we've got lots of different filters for campuses, divisions, sites of care, which question category we're looking at, whether it's key metric or access data. Whether we're looking at monthly or weekly data, and we can see that we're looking at 4 years worth of data for this particular SPC chart. So this SPC chart here is looking at the key metric score by month across 4 years of data across all the campuses, divisions, and sites of care. But for example, as you will know if you're using Power BI already, you can interact different visualizations on the page with each other. So for example, if I wanted to look at ambulatory data, I could click on this ambulatory data visualization, and it will then filter my SPC chart based on ambulatory data. And what's important to notice now is that this is a brand new SPC chart we're now looking at compared to one previously. None of the recalculated of limits are within this chart, none of the annotations, etc. This is a brand new SPC chart. So from an end user's point of view, I'm coming to one Power BI report page, but actually I can have the ability to use the different filters and bookmarks on the page to view different SPC charts in lots of different ways for different campuses, divisions, sites of care, etc. And therefore giving end users the flexibility to drill down, drill through into their own data and explore their data in their own ways. So in the previous screen, what I shared with you in the Cincinnati example was the ability to filter your reports and your SPC charts in different ways, whether you're using visualizations or some other different filters, drop-down menus, etc. As part of your chart. I've been able to see lots of different charts from one report page. Now, the next ask from some of our customers was, okay, well, now we've got thousands and hundreds of thousands of SPC charts within our organization. In healthcare organizations, for example, all the way from directorate, all the way down to ward level, we've got lots of different thousands of SPC charts. We've got one customer, for example, in our outpatients department, have over 100,000 SPC charts automated daily. Feeding directly from their data warehouse with new data points every day. And it then becomes, okay, how do we manage these effectively? As a manager, a ward manager, or a specialty manager, someone who's looking after specific measures or KPIs, how do we have a holistic view of what's going on in our system and how we're performing across these different metrics? So what we've come up with is a concept called Spotlight, EasySPC Spotlight. And what you'll see in this example here is that we've now got a Spotlight icon appearing in the top right of our screen. Now, something we know, Spotlight is an additional module as part of EasySPC. And what it's designed to do is provide that holistic view. So as opposed to clicking on a filter and drilling down into each chart and seeing how we're performing and whether we're in special cause or not, and then actioning those accordingly, what we can now do if we click on Spotlight is bring a scorecard type view and a tabular view of our data. So what we can see is that we're looking from, well, previously we were looking at this chart here. We're looking at a chart across all departments and looking at this chart. So we can see based on this chart, we're in control. The limits are in control. We're not in special cause, etc. So all is good with this particular metric discharge across all departments. However, if we go into Spotlight view, what we can see is, yes, at a glance, we can see, the different departments, the indicators, the dates, whether that particular indicator and department is showing special cause or not, and the latest data point, any annotations, and the latest control limits, baselines, etc. Now, what we can also see is that across all the different departments in the organisation, although discharge as a whole is not in special cause and seemingly performing really well, there are two departments which are showing special cause. So these may be where the person who's sort of in charge and looking after the discharge indicator, as an example, may want to focus in on these particular chart types. So what we can do is we can click on the view chart and drill down to those specific charts. And then it gives us the ability to, maybe we need to recalculate limits and add a shift here, for example. We might want to annotate on a data point and say there has been a change in the system, back on track, for example. And we can save that there too. And then as we come back to Spotlight, what we can see is that the annotation now appears. It's no longer showing the special cause icon because we've made that change and recalculated limits, and it's no longer a special cause. But it gives us the ability to see how our metrics are performing at a holistic view in a way we maybe couldn't do in different ways, just you looking at SPC charts. And you've got the ability to do this in lots of different ways. So you can filter this in different ways, either by, in this example, I'm using department indicator, but this could be factory and measure, this could be a QI project and measure, etc., etc. Effectively, 2 filters can be used as part of Spotlight. So thank you for listening to today's demonstration. Hopefully you found this of value and now seen some different use cases of how EasySPC can be used and the different features and functionality that you're able to use as part of EasySPC 2. So just to recap really quickly, what you can do, there is a free version available to download right now from AppSource that you can go ahead and utilize. If you're then interested in more features, what you can do, as we said, is you can select different control chart types from any of the 10 control chart types, from run charts to C charts, all the way through to XMR and XBRS charts. We can also then mark our own baselines, recalculate our own limits as many times as we need to as part of the process and as the process changes in the system. We can add annotations to provide that context and commentary as part of those journeys to help the end users, the execs, the managers, the management team understand why we've made the changes we've made, or why we've not made changes that they may have assumed we've made, or should make. And we've also shown how we can ghost data points too when there's outliers in our data. We've also shared with you today the different customizable settings that you're able to use, from the font sizes, the rates of the data points, the colors that you're using to ensure that they're on brand with your organization too. As I mentioned, there was only a handful of settings that I quickly went through today. There are over 100 customizable settings, and you can default those for your organization too once you have a license, and we can talk to you more about that as a follow-up. So thank you again for listening to today's demonstration. I hope it was of value, and if you've got any questions, please do reach out to BCN and we're more than happy to help. Thank you.